Hello and welcome to Kitchen Sink Dharma. Now I hope you're feeling comfortable because today I'm going to talk about pain and how we work with pain, how we respond to physical pain. And this is a subject that might land differently depending on who you are, your state of health, your personal experience of pain. But the aim of this is to offer something from an insight meditation perspective, which I hope can be helpful for you. Now in some ways, the experience of pain is universal. None of us get to escape it, but it can also be very individual, it can be very complex, particularly chronic pain. And that seems to be something that's much harder to treat than acute pain. And anybody who's experienced chronic pain over a period of time will know just how wearing it can be and how much it can affect the quality of your life. Pain and the threat of pain can take all the joy out of our lives. So I want to talk a bit about what insight meditation teaches us in relation to pain. And I want to start by saying that pain is actually really important. It's really essential. Might be rather an obvious point, but we need to be able to feel pain. It keeps us alive. And the pain system is something that we've evolved with to promote our well-being. It's the body telling us to act on something. And pain demands an immediate response. But sometimes, like any biological system, it can malfunction. Like when it's telling us to attend to something that we can't do anything about. And for me in the past, there were times when my work was very stressful and I suffered from headaches. I think probably as a result of muscular tension, in the shoulders and the neck. And I didn't really know what to do with them other than taking paracetamol and trying to distract myself in various ways. So in this case, the pain wasn't really helping me. It was just making me more stressed and irritable. And then about 15 years ago, I started going on meditation retreats, and that taught me a great deal about pain and about how we live with pain. In fact, it completely changed my relationship with pain. Now, the first time I did a 10-day retreat, it was a particularly austere kind of retreat. Not all meditation retreats are this difficult. This particular one, we were sitting still for 10 hours a day. And my body just wasn't used to sitting on the floor, so my knees and my back hurt. And there was really no escape. I just had to stick with it. We were just instructed to direct our attention to the physical sensations in the body. And all I could really think about at first was just how uncomfortable I felt. And all of my usual strategies for avoiding pain and discomfort were useless. I couldn't employ them. And so in the end, I just sat and observed what was going on in the body. I sat and observed the experience of pain. And we were instructed to notice how physical sensations are constantly changing, and how the body isn't quite as solid as we tend to think. And we were instructed to notice if something felt pleasant or unpleasant, and just practice meeting it with equanimity. And within a couple of days, I was just fascinated by the whole landscape of sensations in the body. I could observe the physical pain just arising and changing and disappearing and coming back again. But there was all sorts of other stuff going on, all sorts of other more subtle sensations were going on. Some of them were pleasant, some of them weren't so pleasant, but it was always changing. It was always arising and changing and passing. And I learned that there are sensations and feelings in the body, but there's also the thoughts that arise with them. And it's actually the thoughts that create most of the suffering. And that was either because I was thinking obsessively about my comfort and how I could make myself more comfortable, or because I would just disappear off into distraction to try and escape from any feelings of not being comfortable. And when I noticed the mind just starting to wander off and weave stories, I could usually track it back to something arising in the body that I just didn't want to accept. Now, responding to pain can take a certain amount of skill, a certain amount of discernment. And although, of course, some pain needs our attention, some pain requires us to do something about it. It's a signal that we need to do something. Sometimes it can be actually quite helpful to sit with our pain, to observe it, to investigate it. And pain, of course, can be a symptom of our inner world. It can be a blockage, a contraction. It could be an emotional holding on. And I found as I sat and observed the feelings and sensations and patterns in the body, all sorts of unexpected things would come up. There would be memories, there would be images, feelings of sadness that I'd shut away. And actually, bringing these neglected parts of ourselves into awareness can be quite healing. It can be quite powerful. So there's two things I discovered. Firstly, formal meditation practice can be a wonderful training ground for working with pain. But secondly, pain and discomfort can be our teacher. It can actually be our teacher. Sitting in meditation can be physically uncomfortable. Unless you're lucky enough to be really flexible, you're going to get aches and pains. It's going to happen. And it's not actually a bad thing. It gives us something to work with, but it's very important to bring a sense of balance to this. I would always advise lots of movements between sitting meditation. And if sitting is causing a lot of pain, to actually try standing or walking or lying down. And there's certainly some schools of meditation that advocate a more extreme approach. There was a Burmese teacher called Sunlun Sayadaw. In his lineage, you just sit still and bear the pain for hours at a time. You find this also in some schools of Zen. But that doesn't really appeal to me. I think there's a middle way that we can pursue. We stay with pain, we open up to it as a physical sensation, we watch it, we watch it change and disappear. But we never stop listening to the body, and I think it's really possible to damage your body if you override what it's telling you. Now we're taught, in the early Buddhist teachings, we're taught that there are predictable, very common reactions to suffering. So sometimes we get angry, we want to know who we can blame. Sometimes we sink into despair and we see ourselves as being a victim, or we might get very busy trying to make it go away. And sometimes it brings up guilt or shame. And if we apply any of those reactions to physical pain, they don't work. None of these reactions are actually effective in alleviating pain or stress or suffering of any kind. They're just what happens when we can't accept the reality of what's happening in this moment. And what the Buddha proposed instead was investigation and cultivating curiosity and kindness. So when we notice discomfort in the body, we can actually ask ourselves whether we need to respond and act, or whether we can just try and stay with it and breathe into it. Just noticing the desire to turn away. And we can investigate what part of the mind is playing and actually increasing our suffering. What's the story that's arising alongside the physical sensation? There might be a sense of vulnerability that we don't want to admit to. So we can really make pain our teacher. And just to be clear, we don't need to seek it out or cultivate it. There's enough already to work with. Normally we give quite a lot of attention to our comfort or our discomfort and to pain when it comes up, but not always necessarily in a way that helps us. There's often layers of judgment that comes with it. There's layers of reactivity. There's even fear. We can get quite lost in the whole story of the pain. So it's not the kind of attention that heals us or helps us. It's more like an endless, repetitive preoccupation, really, where we ruminate about pain. And instead of doing that, we can actually work with pain. We can transform it. We can work with it on or off the cushion. It's something we can practice with throughout the day. We can start to investigate what we're adding to our pain. Because we're taught all perception is coloured by our state of mind. It's about what we bring to it. We never sort of perceive things purely as they are. So our thoughts, our beliefs, our worldviews, they all affect our perception. We experience a whole constant stream of sensations throughout the day, and then we add our own story to them. And every perception comes packaged up with a little story, a narrative, that's coloured by our past experience. So paying mindful attention to what we feel in the body helps us to see beyond the story, beyond the narrative, and it helps us to release our expectations. Now, one of the people that's taught us a lot about working with pain is Jon Kabat-Zinn, who developed mindfulness courses. He's someone who's helped countless people with pain. And I just want to read a little bit out from his book, Full Catastrophe Living, which some of you might know very well. It's a book that's helped to bring mindfulness into the mainstream. And he writes, "One of the most healing things that you can do for your body during the day is to use your breath periodically to penetrate the pain and help it to soften. You can do this by consciously directing your breath into the painful region, feeling it as it moves into your back, and then visualizing the pain softening and dissolving as you relax and let go into each out-breath. Take a day-by-day, even moment-by-moment perspective. purposefully reminding yourself to take each day as it comes, each moment as it comes, letting go of any expectations that you should feel a certain way or that the pain should lessen, and just watching the breath do its work. Now, I really recommend reading his book, Full Catastrophe Living, if you haven't already, or even better, taking part in a mindfulness course, because this is a very, very direct way of learning to accept our reality, just as it is, just in this moment, whatever is going on for us. So even if we're experiencing pain or other symptoms that are very disturbing, just accepting ourselves without having to add any optional extra stories, any extra suffering. Because what we're practicing is actually the opposite of what we do habitually. So instead of turning away from discomfort, when we experience an ache, a sharp pain, tenderness, stiffness, cramp or whatever, we turn towards it. We go straight in there, we move in very close. And we can ask ourselves, what's this telling me? And it might be something that we need to attend to. We might need to move the body or deal with a particular issue. Do I need to change position? Do I need to rest? Do I need to take some healing action? But then we can ask, what else is going on right now? And if we notice our reactivity, or the mind's reaction to the pain, that's really positive, especially if we can do that without any judgment, without any sense of shame. So in other words, bringing some compassion to ourselves in that moment. If something's unpleasant, it's really helpful to take a moment to examine exactly what it is that makes it unpleasant. And is it just a sensation, or is there some anger, some fear, some rejection going on alongside it? And just like Jon Kabat-Zinn says, this is a process. It's a process of softening. Pain causes the body to contract. The breath can become more shallow. There's often a feeling of fear and constriction, a sense of vulnerability, maybe a loss of control. And what we're practicing is a skill of releasing. Because pain's a process. It's not a solid thing. It's much more like a verb than it is a noun. It's just something that happens. It's not really a thing at all. It's just an unfolding. And instead of identifying with the pain as our pain, we can just breathe into it. We can just be with it. We can allow it all to arise, and we can allow it all to disappear in its own time. And we can allow it to be a process, a changing, constantly changing process rather than something solid. Just noticing any sense of contraction, and then just opening right up. And it's really important to bring some compassion to yourself when we're doing this opening up. This might mean very deliberate, conscious gestures of love and compassion, loving touch, kind words spoken softly to yourself. We've got choices here. There's actually more than one way to respond to pain. And compassion is a very skillful response. Compassion for the body can be very healing, and it makes it possible to stay with our experience a bit longer. If necessary, it allows us to get close to the sensations and really examine what it is that's happening. So thanks for joining me. I hope to see you again on Kitchen Sink Dharma.